The water had reached her chest 3 hours ago. Specialist Coraline Odemba pressed her cheek against the stock of her rifle, her scope trained on a doorway 400 meters downhill, and she did not move. She had not moved in 14 hours. The flooded bunker wanted to kill her. The cold wanted to kill her. The dark wanted to kill her. But Coraline Odemba had made a promise to a dead man's ghost, and she intended to keep it. Her name was Cora to the few people who had earned the right to call her anything at all. 24 years old, daughter of Captain Harold Odemba, the ranger who had wanted sons and gotten daughters instead, and who had never quite learned to hide his disappointment. She was the only female sniper in her battalion, the one they whispered about in the chow hall, the one who had to shoot twice as clean to earn half the respect. And right now, she was chest deep in freezing Afghan floodwater, trapped in an underground observation post that everyone on the surface believed had become her grave. The water rose another centimeter. She felt it creep up her sternum like fingers searching for her throat. Before we continue with Cora's story, drop a comment and let us know what state or country you are watching from. Maybe you know someone who has faced impossible odds and refused to quit. 14 hours earlier, the monsoon had come without warning. The meteorologists had predicted rain. They had not predicted the flash flood that turned the hillside into a river and sent a wall of brown water crashing into the observation bunker where Cora and her spotter had been positioned for overwatch. She remembered the sound, a roar like a wounded animal, then darkness and cold, and the taste of mud in her mouth. Her spotter's name was Sergeant First Class Damon Vickers, 12 years in the Army, reputation as solid as concrete. When the water had started pouring through the bunker entrance, when the walls had groaned and the lights had died, Vickers had looked at her with something she had never expected to see in a senior NCO's eyes. Panic. Pure and absolute panic. "I am going for help," he had said. "Stay on the radio." That was the last time she had seen him. The radio had died 20 minutes later, shorted out by the water that kept rising, rising, rising. She had tried everything. Switched frequencies, tried the backup, pressed the transmit button so many times her thumb had gone numb before the cold took the rest of her hand. Nothing, just static, just silence, just the sound of her own breathing echoing off concrete walls that were slowly becoming her coffin. But the mission was still active. That was the thing that nobody on the surface understood, because nobody on the surface knew she was still alive. Intel had confirmed that Commander Fard Wazir, the Taliban leader who had executed 4 American prisoners on video last month, would appear at the compound mosque for sunset prayers. One doorway, one window of opportunity, one shot. She had volunteered for this position. That was the part that kept playing in her head like a song she could not stop hearing. Staff Sergeant Benitez had 3 kids waiting for him in El Paso. A daughter who had just started walking. Twins on the way. When a mission briefing had ended and the commander had asked for volunteers for the forward observation post, Cora had seen Benitez's hands start to rise, and she had spoken first. "I will take it," she had said. "I do not have anyone waiting for me." That was not entirely true. She had a brother in basic training, a mother who called every Sunday, a father who might notice she was gone, eventually, once someone told him. But she had looked at Benitez and his wedding ring and his photographs, and she had made the only choice that let her sleep at night. Now she was chest deep in water that smelled like rust and rot, her fingers so cold she could barely feel the trigger guard, and Staff Sergeant Benitez was probably eating dinner with his family in the forward operating base chow hall, completely unaware that the woman who had taken his place was fighting to survive. The bunker was small, 12 feet by 12 feet, built into the hillside for concealment. One entrance, now completely submerged. One firing port, still 2 feet above the waterline, just wide enough for her rifle barrel. The walls were concrete and earth, sweating moisture, pressing in on her from every direction. Cora was claustrophobic, had been since she was 7 years old, when she had fallen into her grandmother's well and spent 4 hours in the dark waiting for someone to find her. The therapist at Walter Reed had given her breathing exercises. The drill sergeants at Fort Benning had given her exposure training. Neither had prepared her for this, for the weight of the earth above her, for the water climbing her body like a living thing. for the knowledge that if she panicked, if she thrashed, if she did anything except stay perfectly still, she would disturb her rifle and lose the shot that 4 dead Americans were counting on her to take. She breathed in for 4 counts, held for 4 counts, out for 4 counts. The method her trainer, Sergeant Kwame Asani, had taught her during sniper school, back when she had been the recruit that everyone expected to wash out. You have something the others do not have, Asani had told her once. You know what it feels like to be afraid, and you know how to keep shooting anyway. The scope fogged from her breath. She waited, let clear, adjusted her position by millimeters, feeling the water shift around her, feeling the cold seep deeper into her bones. Through the scope, she could see the compound, the mosque with its single minaret, the doorway where Fardwazer would appear in approximately 2 hours, if the intel was right, if the mission was still active, if anyone in the world still cared about the woman trapped in this flooded tomb. A crackle from somewhere behind her. The radio. She twisted her head, hope flaring in her chest, and saw the unit mounted on the wall above the waterline. It was not completely dead. Something was getting through. Fragments of voices. Words she could not quite make out. She strained to listen. Caught syllables. Recovery. Remains. Her blood went cold in a way that had nothing to do with the water. They were not coming to rescue her. They thought she was already dead. They were planning to retrieve her body. 400 meters uphill and a world away, Sergeant First Class Damon Vickers stood in the command center of Forward Operating Base Sharana and delivered the performance of his life. She did not make it, sir. Vickers let his voice crack on the last word. Practice grief. The kind that made other soldiers look away out of respect. The whole bunker collapsed when the flood hit. I barely got out myself. There was nothing I could do. Captain Brennan nodded slowly, his face carved from exhaustion and too many casualty reports. Specialist Odemba was a fine soldier, he said. We will make sure her family knows she died serving her country. Vickers lowered his head, hid his eyes. Thank you, sir. I just wish I could have done more. He could feel the other soldiers in the room watching him, could feel their sympathy, their respect for a man who had nearly died trying to save his spotter. None of them knew the truth. None of them knew that when the water had started pouring in, Damon Vickers had felt something snap inside his chest, something that had been broken since Kandahar and had never properly healed. None of them knew that he had left Coraline Odemba in that bunker while she was still calling his name. Across the command center, Staff Sergeant Yolanda Rains watched the scene unfold with eyes that missed nothing. Intelligence analyst. 8 years in the Army. She had built a career on noticing the details that other people overlooked, and right now, every instinct she had was screaming that something about Vickers' story did not add up. The timeline was wrong. She had been monitoring the drone feeds when the flood hit, tracking weather patterns for the mission brief. Vickers claimed the bunker had collapsed instantly, that he had barely escaped with his life. But the footage showed him emerging from a hillside at 0418 hours. The major flood surge had not hit until 0431. 13 minutes. What had he been doing for 13 minutes? Rain said nothing. Not yet. She had learned long ago that accusations without evidence were worse than useless. They were dangerous. But she filed the inconsistency away in the part of her mind where she kept all the things that did not make sense, and she watched Damon Vickers accept condolences he had not earned. In the communications bay, Private First Class Tomas Delgado was doing something he was not supposed to be doing. He was listening to a dead frequency. The official word had come down an hour ago. Observation Post 7 was destroyed. Specialist Odemba was killed in action. All monitoring of her assigned frequency had been terminated. But Delgado had not switched channels. He did not know why. Maybe it was the fact that he had spoken to her just yesterday, had heard her laugh at one of his terrible jokes, had thought she seemed like someone who deserved better than a flooded grave in a country 10,000 miles from home. So he listened. Static. White noise. The empty hiss of a frequency that nobody was supposed to be transmitting on anymore. And sometimes, just sometimes, he thought he heard patterns in the static. Rhythms that almost sounded like someone tapping. Like someone trying to send a message that their broken equipment could not quite carry. He told himself he was imagining it. Grief did strange things to people, but he did not change the channel. In the bunker, Cora pressed her forehead against the cool metal of her rifle and let herself feel the weight of what she had just heard. Recovery of remains. They thought she was dead. They were not coming to save her. They were coming to collect her body. For a moment, just a moment, she let the despair wash over her. Let it fill her chest the way the water was filling the bunker. Let herself imagine giving up, letting go of the rifle, sliding beneath the surface, letting the cold take her somewhere warm. Then she thought about her father. Captain Harold Odemba had never told his daughter he was proud of her. Not once in 24 years. When she had graduated basic training, he had nodded and said she had met the minimum standard. When she had earned her sniper qualification, he had pointed out the 2 shots that had landed outside the center ring. When she had deployed to Afghanistan, he had told her to keep her head down and not embarrass the family name. She had spent her whole life trying to earn words he seemed incapable of speaking. Had chosen the army because he was army. Had chosen infantry because he said women did not belong there. Had chosen sniper school because it was the hardest thing she could find, the thing most likely to make him finally see her as something more than the daughter he had gotten instead of a son. And now she was going to die in a flooded bunker, and he would never know what she had been willing to endure for a mission she believed in. He would get a folded flag and a letter that said his daughter had served with honor, and he would nod the way he always nodded, and that would be the end of the story of Coraline Odemba. No, the word rose up from somewhere deep inside her, from the place where she kept every dismissal and every doubt, and every time someone had told her she was not enough. No, she was not going to die here. She was not going to let them write her off as a casualty of weather. She was not going to give Damon Vickers the satisfaction of being right about her. She adjusted her grip on the rifle, felt the trigger guard against her frozen finger, sighted through the scope at the doorway 400 meters away, and let her breath settle into the rhythm that Sergeant Asani had drilled into her until it was more natural than her own heartbeat. Her brother had told her something the night before she deployed. They had been sitting on their mother's porch in Houston, watching the sun go down, and Marcus had been quieter than usual. He was 18 then, about to start basic training himself, following in footsteps he had once sworn he would never follow. I talked to Dad last week. Marcus had said he was drinking, which is the only time he ever says anything real. You know what he told me? He said you're the bravest person he has ever known. He said he does not know how to tell you because he does not know how to talk to brave people, only how to make them. Cora had not believed him, had told herself Marcus was just saying what he thought she needed to hear. But now, chest deep in water that wanted to kill her, she let herself hold onto those words like a rope thrown into darkness. The water rose another centimeter. She felt it touch the base of her throat. Through the scope, she saw movement in the compound. Baikolas, men with rifles. Preparation for something. The target was coming. Commander Farid Wazir was going to walk through that doorway, and when he did, Coraline Odemba was going to be there to meet him. Dead soldiers do not complete missions. If she took this shot, if she killed the man who had executed 4 Americans on video, someone would have to explain how a dead woman had pulled the trigger. Someone would have to answer questions. Someone would have to look at the timeline and realize that Damon Vickers had lied. She smiled. It hurt her frozen face, but she smiled anyway. "Come on," she whispered to the doorway. "Come out and meet me. I've been waiting for you all day." Something touched her leg. Cora froze. Every muscle in her body locked tight as she felt it brush against her calf beneath the black water. Something solid. Something moving. Her mind raced through possibilities. Debris. Equipment that had come loose from the walls. A piece of the ceiling that had broken free. Or something alive. She could not see beneath the surface. The water was too dark, too thick with mud and silt. She could only feel the thing sliding past her leg, bumping against her knee, moving with a purpose that debris did not have. Her breathing shattered. The careful rhythm she had maintained for 14 hours dissolved into short, sharp gasps that fogged her scope and sent ripples across the water. Her chest tightened. The walls of the bunker seemed to press closer, the ceiling dropping lower, the darkness thickening until she could feel it wrapping around her throat. Not now. Not now. She could not afford to panic. She could not afford to move. The rifle was balanced on a floating piece of debris she had positioned hours ago, her only stable platform in a world that had turned to liquid. One wrong movement, and she would lose her angle on the doorway. One splash, and she would have to spend precious minutes she did not have reacquiring her sight picture. The thing touched her leg again, pressed against her thigh. Held there. Cora screamed. The sound came out strangled, half-swallowed, but it echoed off the concrete walls and filled the bunker with her terror. She thrashed without meaning to, her body responding to fear that went deeper than training, deeper than discipline, all the way down to the 7-year-old girl who had spent 4 hours in a dark while convinced she was going to die. The rifle shifted. The scope swung wide. She lost the doorway. No, 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 no. She forced herself to stop, forced her legs to go still, even though every nerve in her body was firing, demanding that she move, that she flee, that she get away from whatever was touching her in the dark. She closed her eyes, pressed her cheek against the rifle stock, made herself breathe. In for 4 counts. Hold for 4 counts. Out for 4 counts. Sergeant Asani's voice in her memory. Calm and steady, the way he had been that day at the range when she had missed her qualifying shots and wanted to quit. Fear is not your enemy, Odemba. Fear is information. It tells you that something matters. The only question is whether you're going to let it make decisions for you or whether you're going to make decisions for yourself. She opened her eyes, looked through the scope. The doorway was gone, replaced by a stretch of mud wall that meant nothing. She adjusted her aim, millimeter by millimeter, fighting the tremor in her hands, fighting the cold that had turned her fingers into clumsy stumps of flesh. There, the doorway, the place where Farid Wazir would appear. The thing beneath the water moved away from her leg. She let go, did not look down, did not try to identify it. Whatever it was, it did not matter. Nothing mattered except the doorway and the shot and the promise she had made to 4 dead men, whose faces she had memorized from the intelligence briefing. At Forward Operating Base Sharena, Staff Sergeant Rains was doing what she did best. She was asking questions that made people uncomfortable. Sergeant Vickers, she said, catching him in the hallway outside the command center. I am updating the incident report for headquarters. Can you walk me through the timeline one more time? Vickers stopped. His face did something complicated, cycling through annoyance and grief, and something else that Rains could not quite identify. I already gave my statement, he said. It is all in the report. I know. I just want to make sure I have the details right. You said the bunker collapsed when the flood hit. What time was that exactly? I did not know exactly. It was chaos. Water everywhere. I barely made it out. Rains nodded, kept her expression neutral. The drone footage shows you emerging from the hillside at 0418. The major flood surge hit at 0431. That is 13 minutes before the collapse you described. Something shifted behind Vickers' eyes. Rains had interrogated enough people to recognize the look. The quick calculation of a man deciding how much truth he could afford to tell. The bunker started flooding before the main surge, he said. Water was coming through the entrance. The walls were already failing. I tried to get Odemba to come with me, but she would not leave her position. Said she had a mission to complete. By the time I made it to the surface, the whole hillside was coming down. It was a good lie. Smooth. Delivered with just the right amount of anguish. If Rains had not spent 8 years learning to spot deception, she might have believed it. I see, she said. Thank you for clarifying. She walked away before he could ask why she was really asking. Before he could see the doubt in her eyes and start planning how to address it. In the communications bay, Delgado was still listening to the dead frequency. His shift had ended an hour ago. He should have been in his rack, getting what sleep he could before tomorrow's operations. Instead, he sat with his headphones pressed against his ears, straining to hear patterns in the static. There, a rhythm. 3 short bursts, then 3 long, then 3 short again. It could be interference. Atmospheric noise bouncing off the mountains. A glitch in equipment that should have been retired years ago. Or it could be Morse code. SOS. The oldest distress signal in the world. Delgado reached for the transmit button, hesitated. If he was wrong, if he reported hearing signals from a dead soldier, he would become a joke. The private who could not accept reality. The kid who let grief make him hear ghosts. But if he was right, and he said nothing, then someone was going to die because he was afraid of being embarrassed. He pressed the button. OP7, this is Sharana Base. Do you copy? OP7, please respond. Static. Silence. The empty hiss of a frequency that nobody was supposed to be monitoring. Then, so faint he almost missed it, a single word broke through the noise. A word that made his blood run cold. Patience. It meant nothing to him. Just a word. But it was a word which meant someone was transmitting. Someone was alive. He tore off his headphones and ran. In the bunker, Cora let her hand fall away from the radio. She had been keying the transmit button for hours, tapping out patterns, hoping that something would get through the damaged equipment. She did not know if anyone had heard. Did not know if the single word she had managed to force through the static had reached anyone. But she had tried. That was all she could do. Try, and wait, and keep her scope trained on the doorway where her target would appear. The water touched her collarbone. She tilted her head back, buying herself another inch of air. At this rate, she would be underwater before sunset. Before the shot. Before anyone could reach her. She thought about her rifle. About the name she had given it during sniper school. The name she whispered when she needed to steady her hands. Patience, she said again. Just a little more patience. Cora could not feel her fingers anymore. The cold had moved past pain into something worse. Numbness. Her hands had become foreign objects attached to her wrists, clumsy things that barely responded when she told them to move. She pressed her trigger finger against the guard, testing, and felt almost nothing. Just pressure. Just a vague sense that something was touching something else. This was a problem. This was a very serious problem. A sniper's trigger pull was measured in ounces. The difference between a perfect shot and a miss could be the weight of a thought, the tension of a single muscle fiber. She had spent hundreds of hours training her finger to know exactly how much pressure to apply, exactly when to squeeze, exactly how to let the shot surprise her so that she did not flinch and pull the round wide. All of that training was useless if she could not feel the trigger. She began doing isometric exercises beneath the water, clenching her fists, releasing, clenching again, pressing her palms together and pushing until her arms trembled. Anything to force blood into her extremities. Anything to keep her muscles from shutting down completely. The water was at her collarbone now. She had maybe 6 inches of clearance before it reached her mouth. 6 inches and perhaps 2 hours until sunset, until the target appeared, until everything she had endured either meant something or meant nothing at all. She pressed the trigger, felt it move beneath her finger. Still there, still functional. She just needed to keep it that way long enough to take one shot. At Forward Operating Base Sharana, Delgado burst into the intelligence section like a man whose hair was on fire. He found Staff Sergeant Rains at her workstation, reviewing drone footage with the kind of focused intensity that made junior soldiers afraid to interrupt her. He interrupted her anyway. Staff Sergeant, I heard something. On the OP7 frequency. Someone transmitted. Someone said a word. Rains turned slowly. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes had sharpened in a way that made Delgado feel like he was being dissected. What word? Patience. Just that. Patience. But it was definitely a voice, Staff Sergeant. Someone is alive down there. Rains was quiet for a long moment. Delgado watched her process the information, watched her fit it into whatever framework she had been building in her mind. Then she nodded once, a small sharp movement that felt like a door opening. Come with me, she said. And do not talk to anyone else about this until I tell you to. They found Vickers in the motor pool, checking equipment for the recovery mission he had volunteered to lead. He looked up when they approached, and Delgado saw something flicker across his face. Not grief, not concern, something colder, something that looked almost like calculation. Sergeant Vickers, Rains said, Private Delgado has reported receiving a transmission on the OP7 frequency. A voice transmission. Someone saying a single word. Vickers shook his head. That is impossible. The equipment in that bunker was destroyed. I saw it happen. Nothing could be transmitting from down there. And yet Private Delgado heard something. He heard static. Grief makes people hear things that are not there. Vickers turned to Delgado with an expression of practiced sympathy. I know you want her to be alive, Private. We all do. But I was there. I saw the water coming in. Nobody could have survived that. Delgado opened his mouth to argue, but Rains put a hand on his arm. A warning. A signal to wait. Of course, she said. You're probably right. I just wanted to make sure we had covered all possibilities before we proceed with the recovery operation. What time are you planning to move out? 1800 hours, Vickers said. We want to reach the bunker before dark. Rains nodded, thanked him for his time, led Delgado away without another word. They were halfway across the base before she spoke again. Her voice was low, meant only for him. That man is lying, she said. I do not know why yet, but he is lying. And we're going to find out the truth before he gets anywhere near that bunker. In the flooded darkness, Cora discovered that she had made a mistake. The debris she had been using as a rifle platform was waterlogged, saturated. It was sinking slowly but unmistakably and taking her stable shooting position with it. She had options. None of them were good. She could try to find another piece of debris, but that would mean moving, splashing, disturbing the water in ways that might take minutes to settle. She could try to hold the rifle steady with just her arms, but her muscles were already failing, already trembling from cold and exhaustion. She could give up, accept that the universe had decided she was not going to take this shot. Let the water rise and the darkness take her and the mission fail. No, there had to be another way. She looked around the bunker, straining to see in the dim light that filtered through the firing port. The walls were concrete, slick with moisture, offering no handholds. The ceiling was too high to reach. The water was too deep to stand in, too cold to survive in much longer. Then she saw it. A pipe, metal, rusted, running along the wall near the firing port. It had probably been part of the ventilation system before the flood. Now it was just a piece of infrastructure, forgotten and useless. Except it was not useless. It was stable. It was solid. And if she could wedge her rifle against it, she would have a platform that would not sink. Moving was agony. Every motion sent ripples across the water. Every ripple disturbed her aim. Every disturbance cost her precious seconds of reacquisition time. But she forced herself forward, inch by inch, until she could reach the pipe, until she could press her rifle barrel against the metal and feel it hold steady. Better. Not perfect, but better. She could work with this. Through the scope, she saw more vehicles arriving at the compound. More men with rifles. More preparation for whatever was coming. The sun was lower now, painting the Afghan hills in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful in a terrible way. The kind of sunset that poets wrote about and soldiers died under. She checked her watch. 90 minutes until sunset prayers. 90 minutes until Fardwazer would walk through that doorway and give her the only chance she was ever going to get. At that same moment, Vickers was walking toward the communications bay. His stride was casual. His expression was calm. But inside, his mind was racing through scenarios and contingencies, calculating risks and rewards. Delgado had heard something. That was a problem. If the private kept talking, if he convinced someone to investigate before the recovery team reached the bunker, everything Vickers had built over the past 14 hours would collapse. He found Delgado alone at his station, headphones around his neck, staring at the radio equipment with an expression of frustrated determination. "Private," Vickers said, "can I talk to you for a minute?" Delgado turned. His eyes were wary, but he nodded. "Of course, Sergeant." Vickers pulled up a chair, sat down close enough to speak quietly. "What exactly did you hear on that frequency? Tell me everything." It was not a request. Delgado heard the steel beneath the words, the authority that came with rank and experience. But he also heard something else, something that sounded almost like fear. Just static mostly, Delgado said carefully, but there were patterns. And one word. Patience. Clear as day. Vickers nodded slowly. "And who else have you told about this?" "Just Staff Sergeant Rains." "Anyone else? Your lieutenant? The commander?" "No, Sergeant. Just her." Vickers smiled. It was not a kind smile. Good, he said. Let's keep it that way for now. I'm sure it was nothing, but I do not want to get people's hopes up over radio interference. You understand. Delgado understood. He understood that Sergeant First Class Damon Vickers was telling him to stay quiet. He understood that there was something very wrong with this entire situation. He also understood that he was not going to obey. Of course, Sergeant, he said, I understand completely. The drainage pipe clogged at 1,647 hours. Cora heard it happen. A gurgling sound, then silence, then the subtle shift in water movement that told her the bunker had just become a sealed container. Whatever small amount of water had been escaping through the damaged drainage system was no longer escaping. The flood had nowhere to go except up. She watched the water level rise. Faster now. What had been a slow creep became a steady climb, inch after inch disappearing beneath the dark surface. Her collarbone vanished. Her shoulders vanished. The water touched the base of her neck and kept coming. She tilted her head back as far as it would go, pressed her skull against the concrete wall behind her, stared at the ceiling, and tried to calculate how much time she had left. 20 minutes, maybe 30. Then the water would reach her mouth, her nose, and Specialist Coraline Odemba would become exactly what everyone already believed she was. A corpse. The rifle was still stable against the pipe. The scope was still clear. The doorway was still visible 400 meters away, waiting for a target who would not arrive for another hour. She had come so close, survived so much, and now the mathematics of fluid dynamics were going to kill her before she could take the shot that mattered. She thought about letting go, thought about releasing the rifle and swimming for the air pocket she had noticed near the ceiling. A small gap where the concrete had cracked and created a space just large enough for a human head. She could survive there, could breathe there, could wait for rescue that might never come while the mission failed and Fardwazer walked free. No, she had not endured 14 hours of cold and darkness and fear to abandon her post now. She had not volunteered for this position so that Staff Sergeant Benitez could live just to throw that sacrifice away. She was a sniper. Her job was to wait and watch and shoot when the moment came. Everything else was secondary. The water touched her jaw. She tilted her head back another degree, kept her eye pressed to the scope, kept breathing. At Forward Operating Base Sharana, Rains was pulling files she was not supposed to be pulling. Her security clearance gave her access to personnel records, incident reports, and operational histories that most soldiers never saw. She used that access now, searching for anything that might explain why Damon Vickers would lie about what had happened in that bunker. She found it in a file marked Kandahar Province, 2010, a classified incident report, an ambush that had gone wrong. 3 soldiers killed, 2 wounded, and a single survivor who had been found hiding in a drainage ditch while his squad mates bled out 50 meters away. Sergeant First Class Damon Vickers, sole survivor, recommended for commendation for his actions under fire. But the details did not match the commendation. Rains read between the lines, read the witness statements that had been taken, and then buried, read the medical evaluation that mentioned acute stress response and recommended psychological treatment that Vickers had apparently never received. The picture that emerged was not of a hero who had fought to save his fellow soldiers. It was of a man who had frozen, a man who had hidden while others died, a man who had somehow convinced his commanders to bury the truth and let him continue his career. Rain sat back in her chair, stared at the screen, understood finally what she was dealing with. Vickers had not left Odemba in that bunker because he was evil. He had left her because he was broken, because when the flood hit and the fear came, he had done exactly what he had done in Kandahar. He had run. He had hidden. He had saved himself and left someone else to die. And now he was trying to cover up the same way he had covered it up before. She reached for her phone, dialed a number she had not called in 2 years. A friend from intelligence school who now worked at Regional Command. Someone who owed her a favor and might be willing to help her prove what she suspected. The phone rang twice before someone answered. "This is Rains," she said. "I need you to pull a drone feed for me. Paktika Province, this morning, 0400 to 0500 hours. And I need it fast. In the bunker, Cora remembered the night her brother had told her about their father. She held on to that memory like a lifeline, pulling herself back from the edge of despair every time the water rose another fraction of an inch. He said you were the bravest person he has ever known. She had not believed it then, had told herself Marcus was just being kind. But now, with the water at her chin and the darkness pressing in from every side, she let herself believe. Let herself imagine that somewhere out there, Captain Harold Odemba was thinking about his daughter, hoping she was safe, proud of the woman she had become even if he had never found the words to say it. She was not going to die here. She was not going to let the last thing her father learned about her be that she had drowned in a hole in the ground. She was going to complete this mission, and she was going to survive, and she was going to walk in his office at whatever base he was stationed at and make him say the words he had been holding back for 24 years. The water touched her lower lip. She closed her mouth, breathed through her nose, kept her eye on the scope. Through the magnified circle of glass, she saw a convoy approaching the compound. 3 vehicles, armed escort, the kind of security that surrounded important people, the kind of security that surrounded high-value targets. He was coming. Fard Wazir was coming, and she was going to be here when he arrived, even if she had to hold her breath to do it. At 1,712 hours, Vickers received approval for his recovery mission. Captain Brennan signed the order himself, authorizing a foreman team to proceed to the bunker site and retrieve Specialist Odemba's remains. They would move out in 45 minutes. They would reach the bunker in 30 more. By 1830, Vickers would be standing at the entrance to OP-7, and whatever secrets it held would be his to control. He gathered his team in the motor pool, checked their equipment, gave them a speech about honoring their fallen comrade, and bringing her home with dignity. They believed him. They trusted him. They had no idea that the man leading them had already left one soldier to die today and was preparing to make sure she stayed dead. Rains watched from across the base, watched Vickers load gear into the vehicle, watched him check his watch with an urgency that had nothing to do with grief. Her phone buzzed. A message from her contact at Regional Command. The drone footage was ready. She had 40 minutes to review it before Vickers reached the bunker. She prayed it would be enough. In the darkness, Cora tilted her head back one more time. The water was at her nose now. She had minutes left, maybe less. She took one final breath, held it, submerged her face beneath the surface, and kept her scope trained on the doorway. Rains watched the drone footage 3 times before she was certain. The timestamp was clear. The image was clear. Everything Damon Vickers had told them was a lie. The footage showed the hillside at 0415 hours. The bunker entrance was visible, partially obscured by vegetation, but unmistakable. And there, emerging from the darkness, was a single figure, running, scrambling up the slope with the desperate energy of a man fleeing for his life. Vickers. He was alone. No one was behind him. No one was with him. He had not tried to help Specialist Odemba escape. He had not stayed until the last possible moment. He had simply run, the same way he had run in Kandahar, the same way he would always run when the fear became too much for him to bear. But that was not the worst part. The worst part came at 0418, when the footage showed Vickers reaching the top of the hill. He stopped there, turned around, looked back at the bunker entrance for almost 30 seconds, and then he walked away. He had known she was still alive. He had known, and he had left anyway. Had gone back to base and told everyone she was dead. Had volunteered to lead the recovery mission so he could make sure no one discovered the truth. Rains felt something cold settle in her chest. Not anger. Something beyond anger. Something that would wait until later, until after she had done what needed to be done. She picked up her phone, called Captain Brennan directly. "Sir," she said, "we need to talk. Right now." Beneath the surface of the flooded bunker, Cora had found something she had not expected to find. Peace. The water was dark and cold and absolutely silent. Her lungs burned with the need to breathe. Her body screamed at her to surface, to gasp, to do anything except stay submerged with her. I pressed to a scope she could barely see through. But her mind had gone somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere that the fear could not reach. She thought about Sergeant Asani, about the day he had taken her aside after a particularly brutal training exercise and told her something she had never forgotten. The best snipers are not the ones who never feel fear, he had said. They are the ones who learn to exist alongside it. Fear and focus, living in the same body, doing the same job. That is what separates the professional from the amateurs. She had not understood him then. She understood him now. Her lungs were on fire. Her vision was starting to blur. But through the scope, she could still see the doorway. Could still see the compound where Fard Wazir would appear. Could still do her job, even if doing her job meant dying in the process. 45 seconds. That was how long she had been under. She had trained for breath holds of up to 90 seconds in controlled conditions. These conditions were not controlled. The cold was sapping her oxygen faster than normal. The stress was accelerating her heart rate, burning through her reserves. She had maybe 30 seconds left before her body overrode her mind and forced her to surface. She started counting. 30, 29, 28. Through the scope, she saw movement at the compound. A door opening. A figure emerging. Not the target. A guard. But the guard was taking up a position that suggested something important was about to happen. Someone important was about to arrive. 20 seconds. 19. 18. Her finger rested on the trigger. Ready. Waiting. Even now, even with her consciousness starting to fragment around the edges, she was ready. 15 seconds. 14. She could not hold any longer. Her body was shutting down. Her vision was going black at the edges. She had to surface, had to breathe, had to trust that she could get her eye back on the scope before the moment came. She pushed herself up, broke the surface, gasped. Air flooded her lungs. Cold, damp, beautiful air. She sucked it in greedily, desperately, her whole body shaking with the relief of being able to breathe again. The water was at her chin. She had maybe an inch of clearance, maybe less, but she was alive, and the mission was still active. At Forward Operating Base Sharina, Vickers was loading the last of his equipment when Captain Brennan's voice came over the radio. Sergeant Vickers, report to the command center immediately. Recovery mission is on hold pending review. Vickers felt the words hit him like a physical blow. He keyed his radio, kept his voice steady. Sir, we need to move now if we're going to reach the site before dark. Can this wait? Negative. Report immediately. That is an order. The other soldiers on his team were looking at him, confused, concerned. He forced a smile, told them there must be some paperwork issue, told them to stand by. Then he walked toward the command center, and with every step, he felt the walls closing in. Rains was waiting for him when he arrived. So was Captain Brennan. So was the drone footage, paused on a frame that showed a single figure emerging from the bunker entrance at 0415 hours. Sergeant Vickers, Brennan said, would you like to explain what I am looking at? Vickers stared at the screen, stared at the timestamp, stared at the frozen image of himself running away from a woman he had left to die. He had rehearsed this moment in his mind, had prepared explanations, justifications, ways to spin the truth into something survivable. But looking at the footage, looking at the evidence of his cowardice captured in perfect digital clarity, he found that all his words had abandoned him. Sir, he said, I can explain. Then explain. Because right now, it looks like you left a soldier behind and told us she was dead. It looks like you lied to your commanding officer and attempted to lead a mission to cover up what you did. She was already gone, Vickers said. The water was too fast. I could not have saved her even if I had tried. The footage shows you stopping at the top of the hill, looking back for 30 seconds, and then walking away. Vickers said nothing. There was nothing to say. Is Specialist Odemba alive? Brennan asked. Is there any chance she survived? Before Vickers could answer, Delgado burst through the door. His face was flushed, his breathing ragged, but his voice was clear and certain. Sir, he said, I am receiving a transmission. Right now. From OP7. Someone is alive down there. Brennan turned to Rains. How fast can we get a rescue team to that bunker? 15 minutes if we move now. Then move. Brennan looked at Vickers with an expression that promised consequences. And someone put this man in custody until I figure out what the hell happened here. In the bunker, Cora pressed the transmit button one more time. Her voice was barely a whisper, her throat raw from cold and thirst, but she forced the words out anyway. This is Specialist Odemba. Op 7. I'm alive. Target approaching. Request immediate extraction after shot is complete. She did not know if anyone heard her, did not know if help was coming, but she had done everything she could do. Now, there was only one thing left. She settled her eye against the scope, watched the doorway, waited for Farid Wazir to show his face. The sun was setting over the mountains. The light was golden and dying. And somewhere in that compound, a man who had murdered 4 Americans was about to learn that justice had been waiting for him all along. The rescue team moved fast. 4 soldiers in a tactical vehicle, racing down the hillside road toward the coordinates that everyone had written off hours ago. Staff Sergeant Rains had insisted on going with them. No one had argued. In the back of the vehicle, she checked her weapon and tried not to think about what they might find when they arrived. The transmission had been real. Delgado had played it for everyone in the command center, that raw whisper of a voice identifying herself as Specialist Odemba, confirming she was alive, requesting extraction after the shot was complete. After the shot, even now, even after everything she had endured, Cora was still thinking about the mission, still planning to complete the job she had volunteered for. Rains had known soldiers like that before, the ones who put duty above survival, who measured their worth by the tasks they accomplished rather than the breaths they took. She had respected them. She had also buried too many of them. Not this one, she thought. Not today. The vehicle hit a pothole and lurched sideways. The driver corrected, pushed harder on the accelerator. They were 7 minutes out, maybe 8 if the road got worse. Rains hoped it would be enough. In the flooded bunker, Cora watched the doorway and let her mind drift through memories she had not visited in years. Her mother's kitchen in Houston, the smell of jollof rice and fried plantains filling the house every Sunday. Her grandmother's stories about Nigeria, about the village where the Odemba name had meant something before her grandfather had crossed an ocean to start again. Her brother's laugh, loud and unrestrained, the kind of laugh that made everyone around him smile whether they wanted to or not. She was cold, colder than she had ever been in her life. The shivering had stopped an hour ago, which she knew was a bad sign. Hypothermia worked that way. First the shaking, then the stillness, then the slow shutdown of everything that made a body work. She was somewhere in the middle of that process now, still functional, still focused, but running out of time in ways that had nothing to do with the water level. Her finger rested on the trigger. She could still feel it, barely, a distant pressure like touching something through thick gloves. But she could feel it, and that was enough. The doorway remained empty. The guards had taken their positions. The vehicles had arrived. Everything was ready for the man who would appear any moment now. The man who had looked into a camera and executed 4 Americans one by one while reading their names from a list. Private First Class Samuel Okonkwo, Specialist Diana Ruiz, Sergeant Timothy Park, Staff Sergeant Michael Volkov. Cora had memorized their names, had studied their faces in the intelligence briefing until she could see them when she closed her eyes. They had been someone's children, someone's friends, someone's whole world, and they had died on their knees in the dirt while a man with a knife smiled for the camera. She was going to kill that man, not for glory, not for recognition, not even for revenge. She was going to kill him because it was the right thing to do, and because she was the only one who could do it, and because 4 families deserved to know that justice had been served even if they never learned who had served it. The sun touched the horizon. The call to prayer would come soon, and with it, Farid Wazir. At Forward Operating Base Sharina, Vickers sat in a holding room and stared at the wall. His hands were not restrained. He was not technically under arrest, but there was a guard outside the door, and his career was over, and everything he had spent 12 years building had collapsed in the span of an afternoon. He thought about Kandahar, about the ambush that had broken something inside him, about the way the fear had risen up like a wave and swept away everything he thought he knew about himself. He had believed he was brave, had believed he would stand and fight when the moment came. Instead, he had hidden in a ditch and listened to his friends die and done nothing. The army had covered it up. His father's connections, his family's reputation, the desperate need to avoid another scandal in a war that was already full of them. They had given him a commendation instead of a court-martial, had let him continue serving as if nothing had happened, had never made him face what he had done, and so he had never healed, had never confronted the coward that lived inside him, had simply pushed it down and pretended it was not there, until today, when the flood had come and the fear had returned and he had done exactly what he had done before. He wondered if Odemba was still alive, wondered if she would survive long enough to tell everyone what he had done. Part of him hoped she would. Part of him was tired of carrying the weight of secrets that grew heavier with every year. The door opened. Captain Brennan stepped inside. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were cold. Specialist Odemba just transmitted again. He said, "She is alive. She is completing her mission. And when she gets back to this base, she is going to tell us exactly what happened in that bunker." Vickers nodded slowly. "Good," he said, and he meant it. The rescue vehicle was 3 minutes out when Cora saw the door open. A figure emerged from the compound. Tall, bearded, moving with the confident stride of a man who believed he was untouchable. He wore traditional robes, white against the fading light, and he paused in the doorway exactly as the intelligence had predicted, exactly where Cora needed him to be. Farid Wazir, commander of a network that had killed dozens of Americans and Afghans. The man who had smiled while he cut throats. The target she had been waiting for through 14 hours of darkness and cold and fear. She adjusted her aim, compensated for the slight tremor in her hands, felt the trigger against her finger, that distant pressure that was all she had left. One breath, in for 4 counts. Hold. The crosshairs settled on his chest. Center mass. No wind. No movement. A clean shot. The kind of shot she had made 1,000 times in training. Out for 4 counts. She began to squeeze. And then, from somewhere above her, she heard voices. American voices. The rescue team, arriving at the bunker entrance, calling her name. "Odemba. Specialist Odemba. Can you hear us?" The sound made her flinch. Just a fraction. Just enough to shift the rifle a millimeter to the left. She corrected. Found the target again. He was still there. Still standing in the doorway. Still waiting to die. One more breath. One more squeeze. She took the shot. The rifle kicked against her shoulder. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, echoing off concrete walls and rolling across the water like thunder. Through the scope, she saw Farid Wazir stagger. Saw his hand go to his chest. Saw him look down at the bloom of red spreading across his white robes with an expression of pure disbelief. Then he fell. He collapsed in the doorway, half inside and half outside the mosque, his body blocking the entrance he had used so many times before. His guards rushed toward him, shouting, searching the hills for the source of the shot. They would not find her. The bunker was too well concealed, the firing port too small, the angle too perfect. By the time they figured out where the bullet had come from, she would be gone. If she survived long enough to be gone. The voices above her were louder now. Closer. She could hear boots on wet ground, the splash of water, the urgent commands of soldiers who had found the bunker entrance and were trying to figure out how to reach her. "Odemba. Specialist Odemba. We are coming. Hold on." She wanted to answer. Wanted to tell them she was here, she was alive, the mission was complete. But her voice had abandoned her. The cold had stolen it, along with most of her strength and all of her warmth. She could only float in the darkness and listen to the sounds of rescue getting closer. The water was at her lips now. She tilted her head back, found the last inch of air, and breathed. Small sips, careful and controlled. The way Sergeant Asani had taught her during water survival training, back when drowning had been a theoretical danger rather than an immediate one. A light appeared at the bunker entrance, bright and blinding after so many hours in the dark. She squinted against it, saw silhouettes moving through the water, heard someone curse at the depth and the cold. "I see her. She is here. Get the medic." Hands reached for her. Strong hands, warm hands, pulling her toward the light. She tried to help, tried to kick her legs and push herself forward, but her body had stopped taking orders. She was cargo now. Dead weight being dragged through black water by soldiers who refused to let her become another casualty report. Someone pried the rifle from her fingers. She did not want to let go. Patience had been with her through everything, had been her only companion in the darkness, had delivered the shot that mattered when nothing else did. But her hands would not close anymore, and the rifle slipped away, and she heard someone say they had it. They would take care of it. She did not need to worry. The air hit her face like a slap, cold and clean and impossibly sweet. She gasped, coughed, felt water come up from her lungs in painful spasms. Someone was holding her head above the surface. Someone else was wrapping something warm around her shoulders. Voices everywhere, urgent and professional, the controlled chaos of a rescue operation in progress. She is hypothermic. Core temperature is critical. We need to move now. Is she conscious? Odemba, can you hear me? She tried to speak, managed a sound that might have been a word. The faces above her blurred and swam, halos of light around dark shapes that could have been anyone. One face came into focus. A woman, Staff Sergeant insignia on her collar. Eyes that held a fierce kind of determination. Specialist Odemba, the woman said, I am Staff Sergeant Rains. You are safe now. The mission is complete. You did it. Cora felt something release in her chest. Something that had been holding on for 14 hours finally let go. She had done it. Against all odds, against all expectations, against the water and the cold and the man who had left her to die, she had done what she came to do. Target, she whispered. Confirm. Rains nodded. We saw him fall. Wazir is down. Your shot was perfect. Perfect. The word echoed in Cora's mind as they lifted her out of the water, as they carried her up the hillside toward the waiting vehicle, as they wrapped her in thermal blankets and started the 4 lines and did all the things that medics did when they were trying to keep someone alive. She had made a perfect shot, hypothermic, exhausted, alone in a flooded bunker with water at her lips and death at her shoulder. And she had still made the shot that mattered. Her father would hear about this, would read the report or get the call or see the commendation when it came through. And maybe, finally, he would understand what his daughter was capable of. Or maybe he would not. Maybe he would nod and say she had met the minimum standard and go back to whatever he was doing. It did not matter anymore. Cora knew what she had done. That was enough. The vehicle started moving. Someone was talking to her, asking questions, trying to keep her conscious. She answered when she could. Name, rank, service number, the basic information that proved she was still present, still fighting, still refusing to give up. She thought about Vickers, about the man who had left her in that bunker and lied about her death. She should have been angry, should have wanted revenge, justice, something to balance the scales for what he had done. But floating in the warmth of the rescue vehicle, surrounded by soldiers who had come for her when everyone else had given up, she found that she did not have room for anger. Vickers was broken. She understood that now. Broken in ways that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with a war that broke people every day. He would face consequences for what he had done. The army would see to that. But she did not need to carry hatred for him along with everything else she was carrying. She had survived. The mission was complete. 4 dead Americans had been avenged. That was enough weight for one day. The medic leaned over her, checking her pupils, monitoring her vitals. You're going to be okay, he said. You're one tough soldier specialist. Cora closed her eyes, let herself drift toward the darkness that had been calling her for hours. Just before she slipped under, she heard Rains on the radio, heard her reporting to base, heard the words that meant everything. Sharana Base, this is Rescue 1. We have Specialist Odemba. She is alive. Target confirmed, eliminated. I repeat, mission accomplished. We're bringing her home. The chaos at Forward Operating Base Sharana started the moment the rescue vehicle came through the gates. Medics swarmed the vehicle before it had fully stopped. Soldiers gathered at a respectful distance, watching, whispering, trying to catch a glimpse of the woman who had come back from the dead. Cora was conscious, but barely. The thermal blankets had brought her core temperature up a few degrees, enough to keep her heart beating in something like a normal rhythm, but her body was still fighting a battle that medicine could only assist. They loaded her onto a stretcher, rushed her toward the medical tent, shouted orders and updates in the clipped language of professionals racing against time. Rains followed as far as they would let her. Watched them cut away Cora's wet uniform and hook her to machines that beeped and hummed with data. Watched the medics work with focused intensity, their hands never stopping, their voices calm even when the numbers on the monitors dipped toward dangerous territory. "She's strong," someone said. "Stronger than anyone I have ever seen. 14 hours in that water. It should have killed her." It almost did, Rains thought. And it would have, if Damon Vickers had gotten his way. She stepped out of the medical tent and found Delgado waiting. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed, but he was standing tall. The private who had refused to stop listening to a dead frequency. The soldier who had trusted his instincts when everyone else had moved on. "You saved her life," Rains said. "You know that, right?" Delgado shook his head. "I just listened. She saved herself." Rains put a hand on his shoulder. Squeezed once. Then she walked toward the command center, where Captain Brennan was waiting for a full debrief and Damon Vickers was waiting for judgment. The compound where Farid Wazir had fallen was in chaos of a different kind. Taliban fighters scrambled through the streets, searching for the sniper who had killed their commander. They fired into the hills randomly, desperately, hitting nothing but rocks and shadows. They did not know that the shooter was already gone. Did not know that a woman they would never see had reached across 400 meters of darkness and ended their leader's life with a single bullet. The news would spread quickly. By morning, every intelligence agency in the region would know that Wazir was dead. By the end of the week, the network he had built would begin to fracture, lieutenants fighting for power, operations falling apart without his ruthless guidance. One shot had changed the shape of a war. One soldier had accomplished what entire units had failed to do, and she had done it while drowning. In the holding room, Vickers heard the commotion and knew what it meant. Odemba was back. Odemba was alive. Everything he had tried to bury was about to be exhumed. He did not try to run, did not try to make excuses. When Captain Brennan came through the door with 2 MPs at his back, Vickers simply stood and offered his wrists. "Sergeant First Class Damon Vickers," Brennan said, "you are being detained pending investigation into charges of dereliction of duty, false official statements, and conduct unbecoming a non-commissioned officer. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you." Vickers nodded. "I understand, sir. Is there anything you want to say before we proceed?" Vickers thought about the question, thought about all the things he could say, all the justifications and explanations and excuses that had kept him safe for 6 years. Then he thought about Kandahar, about the friends he had let die, about the woman he had left in a flooded bunker because he was too afraid to stay. "No, sir," he said. "I have nothing to say. I did what I did. I am ready to face the consequences." Brennan studied him for a long moment. Something shifted in his expression. Not sympathy exactly, something closer to recognition. "For what it is worth," Brennan said, "she does not seem to hate you." Rains said Odemba asked about you on the ride back. Asked if you were okay. Vickers felt something crack in his chest. A wall he had been holding up for years. "She asked if I was okay?" "She did. I do not pretend to understand that woman, but I know enough to recognize grace when I see it." The MPs led Vickers away. He went quietly, his head down, his shoulders carrying a weight that had finally become visible to everyone around him. In the medical tent, Cora drifted in and out of consciousness. The warmth was returning to her body, slowly, painfully, bringing with it sensations she had forgotten existed. Her fingers burned as circulation returned. Her lungs ached with every breath. Every muscle she owned was screaming from 14 hours of tension and cold. But she was alive. That fact kept breaking through the fog, surprising her every time she remembered it. She was alive, and the mission was complete, and somewhere in the world, for families would learn that the man who had murdered their loved ones had finally paid the price. She opened her eyes, found Rains sitting beside her bed, reading something on a tablet. "Staff Sergeant," Cora whispered. Her voice sounded like gravel and broken glass. Rains looked up, smiled. Welcome back, Specialist. How do you feel? Like I got hit by a truck that was carrying a swimming pool. Rains laughed. The sound was warm and unexpected. You have a sense of humor. That is a good sign. The medics say you're going to be fine. Full recovery expected, though they want to keep you under observation for the next 48 hours. The mission, Cora said. Wazir, confirmed dead. Intelligence verified it an hour ago. Your shot hit him center mass. He was gone before he hit the ground. Cora closed her eyes. Let the information wash over her. Confirmed. Verified. Complete. Vickers, she said. In custody. He will face a court-martial. Multiple charges. His career is over. Cora nodded slowly. She should have felt satisfaction. Vindication. Something to mark the justice that was finally being served. Instead, she felt tired. Tired and sad and strangely empty. He was scared, she said. In the bunker, when the water started coming in, I saw his face. He was terrified. Rains was quiet for a moment. That does not excuse what he did. No, but it explains it. Cora opened her eyes again, looked at Rains with an expression that seemed older than her 24 years. I've been scared my whole life. Scared of failing. Scared of not being enough. Scared of proving everyone right who ever doubted me. The only difference between me and Vickers is that I learned to keep moving when the fear hit. Rains studied her, the young specialist with the old eyes. The sniper who had held her position through 14 hours of hell because giving up was not in her vocabulary. You are remarkable, Rains said. You know that? Cora almost smiled. I am alive. Right now, that feels like enough. The word spread through military channels like wildfire. By midnight, every base in Afghanistan knew the story. By morning, it had reached command centers in Kuwait, Germany, and Washington. A female sniper had held her position for 14 hours in a flooded bunker, been left for dead by her spotter, and still completed her mission. She had eliminated one of the most wanted targets in the region while the water rose to her lips. The story was too good to stay classified. Within 48 hours, it would leak to the press. Within a week, Specialist Coraline Odemba would become a name that people recognized. But for now, in the quiet hours after her rescue, she was just a soldier in a hospital bed, trying to remember how to feel warm. The message reached Captain Harold Odemba at 0347 hours, Kandahar time. He was asleep in his quarters when his sergeant knocked on the door. Urgent communication from Sharana, the sergeant said. Something about his daughter. Harold Odemba had spent 26 years in the army. He had learned to control his reactions, to keep his face neutral no matter what news arrived. But when he read the message, when he saw the words presumed dead and survived and mission complete, the mask cracked. He was on a helicopter within the hour. Cora woke to sunlight streaming through the medical tent. Real sunlight, not the filtered glow that had reached her in the bunker. She lay still for a moment, letting herself feel the warmth on her face, the clean sheets beneath her body, the absence of water pressing against her skin. She was alive. The thought still surprised her. A nurse came by to check her vitals. Good news, the nurse said. Your core temperature is back to normal. Kidney function looks good. No signs of lasting damage. You are one lucky soldier. Cora did not feel lucky. She felt hollowed out, like something essential had been scooped from her chest and not yet replaced. But she nodded and thanked the nurse and tried to smile. Rains appeared an hour later with coffee and news. Vickers is being transferred to Bagram for processing, she said. Court-martial will probably take a few months. They are also reopening the investigation into the Kandahar incident from 2010. He froze then too, Cora said. It was not a question. Rains nodded. 3 soldiers died because he hid instead of fighting. The army covered it up, gave him a commendation to keep the story quiet. Cora wrapped her hands around the coffee cup. Let the warmth seep into her palms. I almost feel sorry for him, she said. Almost. You are more forgiving than I would be. It is not forgiveness. Cora took a sip of coffee. It is just exhaustion. I do not have the energy to hate him right now. Maybe later. Maybe never. I have not decided yet. Rain smiled. That is probably healthy. Hatred takes a lot of maintenance. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Outside the tent, the base was waking up, soldiers moving through their morning routines, the sounds of vehicles and voices creating a backdrop of ordinary life. "There is something else," Rains said. "Someone is here to see you. Arrived about an hour ago. He has been waiting outside the tent, driving the nurses crazy." Cora's heart stopped. "Who?" Before Rains could answer, the tent flap opened. A figure stepped through, tall and broad-shouldered, wearing a uniform that carried the insignia of an Army Ranger. His face was older than she remembered, more lined, more weathered by years and war. But his eyes were the same, dark and intense and impossible to read. Captain Harold Odemba looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he crossed the distance between them in 3 steps and pulled her into an embrace that drove the air from her lungs. Cora could not remember the last time her father had hugged her, could not remember if he ever had. She had spent her whole life trying to earn a single word of praise from this man, and now he was holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and she did not know what to do with her hands. "They told me you were dead," he said. His voice was rough, broken in places she had never heard before. "They told me you were dead, and I was not there. I was not there, and I never told you." "Told me what?" Cora whispered. Her father pulled back, held her at arm's length, looked at her with eyes that were bright and wet in a way she had never seen. "That you are the bravest person I have ever known," he said. "That I do not know how to talk to you, because I do not know how to talk to someone who makes me feel small. That every time you accomplish something, I pointed out the flaws because I was terrified that if I praised you, you would stop pushing. That I have spent 24 years being your father, and I have done it wrong in every way that matters." Cora felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She had not cried in the bunker, had not cried when the water reached her lips or when the darkness pressed in or when she thought she was going to die alone. But now, in the safety of a hospital bed with her father's hands on her shoulders, she let herself break. "Marcus told me," she said, "what you said when you were drinking, that I was brave." Her father nodded. "I meant it. I have always meant it. I just could not find the words when I was sober." He paused, swallowed hard. "Your mother used to say I was emotionally constipated." She was right. Cora laughed. The sound came out wet and strange, tangled with tears. "That is disgusting, Dad. I know, but it is accurate." He pulled her into another hug. "I am sorry, Coraline, for all of it, for every time I made you feel like you were not enough. You have always been more than enough. You have always been everything." She held on to her father and let 24 years of doubt drain out of her body. Let herself believe, finally, that she had always been loved, that the word she had been chasing had been there all along, locked behind a wall that neither of them knew how to climb. They stayed that way for a long time. Father and daughter, reunited in a medical tent on the other side of the world, finally speaking the language they should have learned years ago. Outside, the sun continued to rise. The war continued to rage. But inside that tent, something that had been broken was finally beginning to heal. 3 days after her rescue, Cora was released from the medical tent with strict orders to rest. She ignored them almost immediately. She found Sergeant Kwame Asani in the chow hall, eating breakfast alone at a corner table. He looked up when she approached, and his face broke into the widest smile she had ever seen on him. "Odemba," he said, "you're supposed to be in bed. I have been in bed for 3 days. I was going to lose my mind." Asani gestured to the seat across from him. She sat down, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Teacher and student. The man who had believed in her when no one else had, and the woman who had proven him right in the most spectacular way possible. "I heard the details," Asani said. 14 hours, water up to your chin, and you still made the shot. I had a good teacher." He shook his head. "I taught you how to shoot. I taught you how to breathe. But what you did in that bunker, that was not something anyone could teach. That came from somewhere deeper." Cora thought about the darkness, the cold, the fear that had wrapped around her throat and tried to squeeze the life out of her. She thought about the choice she had made, over and over again, to stay at her post when every instinct screamed at her to run. "You taught me that fear is information," she said. "You told me the best snipers learn to exist alongside it. I just took you literally." Asani laughed, a deep, rich sound that made the soldiers at nearby tables turn and look. "I suppose you did. He leaned forward, his expression growing serious. I am proud of you, Coraline. Not because of the shot, not because of the mission, because you survived. You found a way to keep going when anyone else would have given up. That is what makes a true soldier. Cora felt the words settle into her chest. Another piece of validation she had not known she needed. Thank you, Sergeant, for everything. He waved a hand. Do not thank me. Just keep making me look good. I plan to tell everyone I trained the greatest sniper in the Army for the rest of my career. They talked for another hour. About the mission. About Vickers. About what came next. Asani told her there were already whispers of commendations. Maybe even a medal. Cora did not care about medals. She cared about the fact that she was sitting in a chow hall eating bad eggs and drinking worse coffee, and she was alive to complain about it. That afternoon, she visited Delgado at the communications bay. He stood up when she entered, nearly knocking over his chair in his haste. Specialist Odemba. I mean, ma'am. I mean. He stopped, took a breath. I do not know what to call you. Cora smiled. Cora is fine. You're the one who heard me, right? On the radio. Delgado nodded. I was not sure at first. Everyone said you were gone, but something did not feel right. I just kept listening. You saved my life. He shook his head, the same way Rains had when Cora tried to thank her. I just did my job. Your job was to change the channel after I was declared dead. You did not. That is not following orders. That is following instinct. Cora stepped closer, looked him in the eyes. Do not ever apologize for trusting your gut. Private. Sometimes it knows things your brain has not figured out yet. Delgado straightened. Something shifted in his posture, a new confidence taking root. Yes, ma'am. I mean, Cora. Thank you. She left him standing a little taller than she had found him. That evening, her father found her on the base's small observation deck, watching the sun set over the mountains. He had extended his stay at Sharana, pulling strings she did not want to know about, refusing to leave until he was certain she was truly okay. Your brother called, he said, settling into the chair beside her. He saw the news. He is very upset that you almost died without telling him first. Cora laughed. That sounded like Marcus. He also said to tell you that he is graduating early. Top of his class. He will be deploying soon. The words hit her like a punch. Deploying? Where? Her father was quiet for a moment. Here. Sharana. His orders came through yesterday. Cora stared at the mountains. Thought about her little brother, the one who used to cry when she left for school, the one who had followed her around like a shadow until he was old enough to have his own friends. He was coming here, to this place where she had almost died, to this war that had almost swallowed her whole. He will be okay, her father said, reading her thoughts. He has a good head on his shoulders, and he has something to live up to now. A sister who held her position for 14 hours in a flooded bunker and still made the shot. I do not want him to live up to anything. I want him to be safe. Her father reached over and took her hand. The gesture was awkward, unpracticed, the movement of a man who was still learning how to show affection after a lifetime of holding it back. He will have people looking out for him, he said. I will make sure of it. And so will you. Cora squeezed his hand. She thought about the sister she had been before the bunker, the one who had measured herself against impossible standards, who had chased validation from a father who did not know how to give it, who had believed that she was only worth as much as her accomplishments. That sister was gone now. The water had washed her away. In her place was someone new, someone who knew her own strength, someone who had faced death and chosen to keep fighting, not for medals or praise or anyone's approval, but because it was who she was. Someone who could finally look at her father and see a flawed man trying his best, rather than a judge whose verdict she could never satisfy. Dad, she said. Yes, I love you. I do not think I have ever said that. Her father's grip tightened on her hand. His voice came out rough. I love you too, Coraline. I always have, even when I was too stupid to show it. They sat together and watched the sun disappear behind the mountains. Father and daughter, soldiers both, finally on the same side of a wall that had divided them for 24 years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Marcus would arrive soon, bringing new worries and new reasons to pray. The court-martial would proceed, and Cora would have to face Vickers again, would have to tell her story to officers and lawyers and anyone else who needed to hear it. The war would continue, and she would continue to serve because that was who she was and who she had always been. But tonight, she was at peace. Tonight, she was enough. 2 weeks later, Cora stood at the base gates and watched a convoy of new arrivals roll through. She had been cleared for duty 3 days ago, though the medics had made her promise to take it easy for another month. She had nodded and agreed and immediately volunteered for training rotations that would keep her busy until her next mission assignment. Some habits were harder to break than others. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened. Fresh soldiers spilled out into the Afghan sun, blinking and nervous and trying to look like they belonged. Cora remembered that feeling, remembered being new and scared and desperate to prove herself. It felt like a lifetime ago. She spotted him before he spotted her. Marcus Odemba, 20 years old, wearing a uniform that still looked too clean and carrying himself with the careful confidence of someone who had been told he was good but had not yet proven it. He had their mother's smile and their father's stubborn jaw, and when he turned and saw his sister standing there, his face lit up like a sunrise. "Cora," he shouted. He dropped his bag and ran toward her, military protocol forgotten, and swept her into a hug that lifted her off her feet. "Put me down," she said, laughing. "You are embarrassing me in front of my colleagues." "I do not care." He set her down but did not let go, his hands on her shoulders, his eyes searching her face. "You almost died. You almost died, and I found out from the news. I was a little busy surviving. Writing letters was not at the top of my priority list." Marcus shook his head. His eyes were bright, and she realized with a start that he was fighting back tears. "I thought I lost you," he said. "When I heard the first report, the one that said you were dead, I thought I lost you. And I realized I never told you what you meant to me. You can tell me now." He took a breath. "You are the reason I joined," he said. "Not because Dad wanted it, and not because of tradition or duty or any of that. Because of you. Because I watched you fight for everything you earned, and I wanted to be half as strong as my sister." Cora felt her throat tighten. "Marcus, I mean it. You taught me what it looks like to refuse to give up, even when the odds are impossible, even when everyone counts you out." He smiled. It was their mother's smile, warm and bright and full of love. "And now you went and proved it to the whole world. How am I supposed to compete with that?" She pulled him into another hug. "You're not competing with me," she said. "You're standing with me. That is different." They held each other for a moment longer. Brother and sister, reunited in a war zone, carrying on a family tradition that had shaped both of their lives in ways they were only beginning to understand. That night, Cora returned to the armory to retrieve her rifle. The quartermaster had cleaned and maintained it during her recovery, keeping it in perfect condition. He handed it over with something like reverence. "Patience," Cora said, running her fingers along the stock. "Did you miss me?" The rifle did not answer. It never did. But holding it again felt like greeting an old friend, a partner who had been with her through the worst moment of her life and helped her come out the other side. She found a quiet corner of the base and sat down to clean the weapon, even though it did not need cleaning. The ritual was soothing, familiar, a meditation she had practiced hundreds of times, letting her hands work while her mind wandered. She thought about the bunker, about the water rising and the cold seeping in and the absolute certainty that she was going to die. She thought about the choice she had made to stay at her post, to complete her mission, to trust that her training and her will would be enough to carry her through. She thought about Vickers. His court-martial had begun 3 days ago. Rains had sent updates. The evidence was overwhelming. The Kandahar cover-up had unraveled completely, exposing not just Vickers, but the officers who had protected him. Careers were ending. Reputations were being destroyed. The army was cleaning house, and Damon Vickers was at the center of it all. She did not feel triumphant. She felt sad. Sad for the man who had been broken by war and never given the help he needed. Sad for the soldiers who had died because of his fear. Sad for the version of herself who might have become like him, if circumstances had been different, if she had not found a way to keep moving when the darkness closed in. Footsteps approached. She looked up and found Delgado standing there, looking nervous and hopeful. "Specialist Odemba," he said, I mean, Cora. They told me you requested a new spotter for when you returned to active duty. Cora nodded. I did. I wanted to ask. Delgado straightened, trying to look taller. I know I'm just a private. I know I do not have experience. But I learn fast, and I listen well, and I will never give up on you. No matter what. Cora studied him. The young soldier who had refused to stop listening to a dead frequency. Who had trusted his instincts when everyone else had moved on. Who had played a crucial role in saving her life simply by refusing to accept what he was told. She smiled. Report to the range at 0600 tomorrow, she said. We have a lot of work to do. Delgado's face broke into a grin. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I will not let you down. I know you will not. He practically bounced away, and Cora watched him go with something warm spreading through her chest. A new beginning, a new partnership, a chance to pass on everything Sergeant Asani had taught her to someone who deserved it. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know what part moved you most, or share if you have witness courage like Cora's in your own life. The next morning, she took Delgado to the range and began teaching him to shoot. They started with the basics, the fundamentals that Asani had drilled into her years ago. Breathing, patience, the art of waiting for the perfect moment and trusting yourself to take it. He was not a natural. His hands shook. His breathing was too fast. His shots scattered across the target like seeds in the wind. But he listened. He adjusted. He refused to give up. Some people are born knowing who they are, Cora told him as the sun climbed higher over the Afghan mountains. They come into the world already certain of their strength. Delgado looked at her. What about the rest of us? The rest of us have to learn. We have to face the things that scare us and keep moving anyway. We have to fail and fail and fail until one day we do not. She raised her rifle, sighted through the scope, found the target 400 meters away, and let her breath settle into the rhythm that had saved her life. The shot matters, she said, but what matters more is being ready to take it. No matter how long you have to wait, no matter how hard it gets, no matter who counts you out. She pulled the trigger. The bullet flew true. That is what makes a sniper, she said. That is what makes a soldier. And that is what makes a person worth believing in. Delgado nodded slowly. His eyes had changed. Something had taken root behind them, a new determination that would serve him well in the days and years to come. Cora lowered her rifle and looked out at the mountains. Somewhere beyond them, the war continued. Somewhere behind her, her brother was beginning his own journey. Somewhere in the world, 4 families were sleeping a little easier knowing that justice had been served. And here, on a firing range in Afghanistan, Specialist Coraline Odemba was exactly where she belonged. Not chasing approval, not seeking validation, just doing the work she was born to do, alongside people who believed in her as much as she believed in herself. She had spent 24 years trying to prove she was enough. She did not need to prove it anymore.